Hi, Stuart Bruce here, and I am the Spare Time Property Investor. In these podcasts, I'm going to share tips, tricks and lessons that I've learned and will hopefully help you, especially if you're still working the 9 to 5. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Spare Time Property Investor podcast. This week is another interview episode and I'm joined by Mike Clay from Clay Properties. Honestly, I would go and get yourself a notepad. I'd get yourself strapped in because the way he has put together his plan, he's decided on a strategy and then executed that strategy is honestly inspirational, and I think you'll learn a lot from it. So even though he's full-time in property now, he invests in student accommodation, there's so much to learn here if you're working the day job as well as investing in property on the side. So yeah, like I say, get your notepad, get ready because he drops a lot of valuable information in this episode. Before we get into it though, I'd just like to say, thank you so much for joining me on another podcast episode. If you haven't liked or subscribed or anything like that, please go and do that. Please share this episode as well because I think it genuinely is going to be a really valuable one. And also, if you haven't already, go and check out our latest issue of our free newsletter. It's linked in our bio on Instagram. So yeah, without wanting to waste any more time, here is the interview with Mike Clay. So thanks again, Mike, for agreeing to come onto the podcast. First off, it'd be fantastic if you could introduce yourself and what you're up to in property.
Hi, thanks, Stuart, and thanks for having me on. So my name is Mike Clay. I'm a property investor based in Norwich, and I'm one half of Clay Properties, where the other half is my wife, Kerry. And we invest very local to us. We invest in student HMOs within 15 minutes walk of the University of East Anglia. So most of our portfolio is HMOs, chosen for their cash flow. And we're just getting to the point now we're looking at running that for another year or so, but we're starting to think about a bit of diversification in the portfolio, but absolutely still love student HMOs.
That sounds great. We'll get into the detail of the student HMOs and why you've chosen them and potentially the kind of diversification you're planning as well. But for starters, just before we came on, you were saying that you're about a year into being a full-time property investor, which is fantastic. But that means you was just starting full-time as the pandemic hit. So it'd be fantastic to kind of dig into any fears, any preparation you did running up to you leaving your day job, which was an IT director, I believe it was.
That's right. Yeah.
Talk us through that kind of lead up to you leaving the day job.
Sure. It started quite some time ago. It started in August 2017, actually. My wife and I and two children were on holiday in Ibiza. And whilst it was lovely to be on holiday in Ibiza, it was one of the very few times we'd been on holiday for some time. And the day job had me traveling around a lot. Working a lot of hours, and basically wasn't seeing the children. I wasn't really seeing the children grow up. Mm-hmm. So we've been talking for quite some time about how do we address the balance. We've got young children. I want to see them grow up. I don't want to be the guy who's never around. So that's always been the objective. That's always been the vision: is how do we get some time and balance in our lives? I was totally unfit, just working, not seeing the family. So it was really, we needed something to change. So we were looking for that, and property was something I've always been vaguely interested in, just by owning our own houses and seeing them go up in value. In some years, go up in value more than our salary. So I just started to read some books and podcasts, and it was in August 2017 that I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and then just it's like a light bulb going off, going, oh, geez, I've been doing this all wrong. I need to change how I look at assets and liabilities and debt, and from there we started planning out what we're going to do, and we planned out an exit in about 3 years, 3 years time from my work to try and replace my income, or at least replace enough of the income that I could get by, and that was our goal really. So we just dedicated quite a few things to reach those goals. If I break that down into probably there's probably about 8 things that we did that were the most impactful things that we did. The first being setting the vision. So, what are we trying to achieve? Not just leave work, but what do we want to do when we've left work? So we set our vision, and we said we're going to build this company around travel, about intergenerational wealth, against balance and charity. Balance being, spend some time at work and fitness and family. And that was the vision. That's really what we built the company around. Then it was just a case of, well, what strategy in property or anything else allows us to deliver that vision? And we did an awful lot of research. We did 3 months solid research of different areas, property strategies, before kind of nailing down what we wanted to do. And kind of, if we want to hit those 4 things, we wanted to get a high cash flowing strategy. We kind of wanted to invest near home, because if I'm going to invest in a really good area like Manchester or Liverpool or Nottingham, they're about 5 hours from where I live. So that's not going to give me my balance. There's no point in quitting my IT job and then getting on a train for 5 hours to my properties. So
exactly, I was just going to say, you're just creating another type of job. That's all you do.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah. So I mean, that was a lot of slog, because doing that kind of analysis plus a day job, when you're trying to spend a bit more time with children, it doesn't work. You just got to kind of commit and say, for this period of our life, we're going to be doubly busy. I'm going to start a business and do a day job. So how do we fit that around everything? And we did make some commitments. So like every day I'd try and do an hour's property work. So 25 minutes before work, 25 minutes at lunchtime. And so that's like an hour every day, and then a bit more on Tuesdays and a bit more on Sundays. So that's how we kind of tried to put it all together.
So that's really interesting, especially that commitment and defining those kind of times, so you knew what you were kind of looking at in terms of the kind of burden on your week that it was going to have. And I think that's something that a lot of people could probably do well to have, because I have to admit, it kind of it seeps into everything at the moment. So it sounds like a very sensible way of working.
Well, I was trying to, I worked out that I was traveling quite a bit, and I was doing about 8 hours travel across the week. 40 minutes to work, 40 minutes back, then some more journeys, and then if I did 8 hours of traveling, I could have that as podcasts. That's like a day a week of training for me. So that's a day a week of property training. And then if I could do 25 minutes in the morning, 25 minutes at lunchtime, maybe a bit more here and there to make it up for a nice hour, that's 5 hours a week. And then I'll do the rest on Sunday morning. And so that's another day. So I managed to carve out 2 days of a 5-day week additional, just by doing small chunks of time. So a day training a week, and a day property research investigations a week. So kind of working 7 days a week, but in small chunks. And that's how we were able to balance it out, and still see the kids occasionally.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's cool. So you've talked about your vision and your strategy, and then you settled on student HMOs. So clearly HMOs in general, high cash flowing, strategy that a lot of people go to, especially early on in their kind of property careers. But why student HMOs rather than professional?
It's because one of our visions is travel, and with the professional HMO, there's always a turnaround. So once you get your portfolio to a certain size, you kind of always, every month, you're going to have someone checking in and someone checking out. And we knew we'd have a gap between the time where we were managing them to when we could afford to outsource a lot of management or hire our own portfolio manager. And during that time, if we had people checking in and checking out, then it'd be really difficult for us to manage that portfolio. we live 20 minutes from the UEA, University of East Anglia, and there's about 15 or 16,000 students there. And so we started looking at, well, does this give us another opportunity? And different cities have different cycles of student checking in and checking out. And the Norwich cycle just happens to be September. So that means, for most of the kids' school time, the students aren't in the properties. So Easter time, half terms, students aren't there. So they're not really placing much demand on us or Kerry, who manages them. And our mad busy time is the end of August. But, we've got back end of July and the start of August where we can go on nice chunky family holidays. So it was less a financial consideration, although we did look at both of those cost benefit analysis between the two. But it was really, okay, what's our vision? Our vision is to travel more. Therefore, we want to build a strategy around that vision. And so student HMOs just fit that really well because, our children are going to be in school for another 10 years and we want to be able to travel in the school holidays.
Absolutely. That sounds very sensible. And like you're saying, kind of taking the kind of local opportunities and making them work for you as well. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I mean, the returns in Norwich is not quite as good as the returns you could get elsewhere, but it's definitely worth the 5-hour train journey.
I completely agree. And I speak to some people and they travel, miles and miles and miles, which I totally get why they do it. But for us as well, we invest locally, and similar sort of reason, really. The area works well. We might be able to get a little bit more if we went up to Liverpool or Manchester or somewhere like that. But actually, we're busy anyway. And the idea of having those really long car journeys and then creating something that looks kind of like a job for ourselves, it doesn't work for our vision either. So it makes sense.
And it's got benefits I didn't expect as well. So we've been able to buy properties that shouldn't really have been able to buy. So my second property is one of my favourite. It's right opposite the university entrance. It came on at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I phoned the agent straight away and said, I want to view it. Can I go and have a look at it now? And they said, oh, well, you can go around in an hour. I said, brilliant. Yeah, I'll be there. And then so that was in the morning, and I went and did it and agreed a deal and shook the lady's hand, and it was off the market by lunchtime. So that property was a massively good property at a reasonable price, and we're able to move fast and get that secured. So I didn't kind of expect that when I started, that there'd be additional benefits like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And also there's something to be said for knowing a town as well. So you knew as soon as that one came up, you knew that location would be perfect. So you needed to jump on it and get ahead of everyone else. And it sounds like you did a great job in doing that.
Yeah, I think student HMOs are also blessed with a number of, every year there's 2 studies about what students want, and they're funded by the purpose-built student accommodation providers. But they interview 75,000 students.
Oh, wow.
And so we've got the Knight Frank study, and if they go and interview 75,000 students, they say, what do you want in student accommodation? So you've got this wealth of market research material available to you, and you can just go and have a look at it. It's okay, what do they want? And it's always the same 3 or 4 things. It's always location, quality, cost. And randomly this year they put cleanliness in there. I don't know if they've had a bad run of dirty landlords, but so if it's always quality, location, and cost, well, location's always right up there. So location is absolutely critical for us to get the best location possible.
That's really interesting that they do so much market research as well that you can tap into. Do you think everyone who invests in student accommodation kind of realizes it as a powerful kind of market research document that they can just kind of go and have a look at?
I don't know. Well, it's the Knight Frank student accommodation survey. I don't know if people look at it. I totally recommend you go and have a look at it. Any market that you're in and someone's providing you free reviews of 75,000 customers across the country, you've got to go and have a look at it, and because that's what your customer is wanting.
Absolutely. I'll make sure it's linked in the show notes so people can have a look. So
yeah, sounds good.
Great. Okay, so obviously in 2017 you decided this was the plan, and you set your vision, you had your strategy in place. But as you were working your way through that, because it's not that long ago, really, as you were working your way through that, did you have any apprehensions? Did you have any hurdles, kind of fears or anything like that? Or was it very much, let's get on to the next part of this plan and then move along very, very kind of methodically?
Um, it didn't feel very methodical at the time, but I guess looking back, with the benefit of a bit of distance, it was quite methodical. So we did a cash flow forecast,
Mhm.
and said, okay, if I want to leave my job, what's the minimum that we can get away with? So we went through, we cut out loads of expenses, went and got new deals on everything from Sky to broadband to everything to try and cut our costs down. So, okay, well, this is our minimum living costs. So how many HMOs at what profit margin will we need to get that? So we had a kind of survive budget and then we had a thrive budget. This is what we'd like to get per month.
Yeah.
And we did that cash flow forecast. And then it was just a case of, okay, how many HMOs do we need at what point? So we kind of built a cash flow forecast in two ways. It was how many HMOs at what profit level, and then also as we got more properties, we ramped up my work down so that I went part-time before I left work. So we kind of had this almost crossing over of my salary dropping down as the rental income came up. So we we definitely had that, but you asked about fears. Yeah, I mean, I was really nervous in May of last year. I was absolutely scared. Yeah, I really was, because I've just left work. Don't really know if this is going to work. Cash flow forecast and a vision and a strategy and a plan is all very well and good, but you're in the middle of a global pandemic. What if none of the students come back?
Yeah.
They might not. What if none of them pay rent? And so, yeah, it was properly nerve-wracking. But I just had to keep on telling myself, look, we're going to give this a go. And if it doesn't work, what's the worst that's going to happen? I'll go and get a consulting job in London for a year. And during that time, we'll keep going. So yeah, that was, there wasn't really a safety net. I didn't build up a pot of money to, cushion me for 6 months. We were buying properties as fast as we could, and so
That focuses
so it was. Yeah, yeah. Because I really didn't want to go back and go back into my IT job or any IT job. I wanted to make property a career. So yeah, I was uncomfortable. I was nervous, but yeah, looking at the year we've had, yeah, we've bought 5 properties in the last year, and we've picked them up for really good prices as people sold them during the pandemic, and so the prices were reduced, definitely compared to where they are now.
So you're just saying that there as well about not having a pot of money as a safety net. So did you rely on earned money, or did you have private finance, or did you buy properties that needed work doing to them so you could increase the value and then refinance them? How did you what was your kind of funding strategy for these?
So we had a real discussion around what strategy do we want, because we wanted to get out of work. So we talked about rent to rent a little bit, but it didn't really fit with our vision of building intergenerational wealth. So we said, okay, well, what we'll do is we'll try and buy assets. We'll always try and buy assets, and we will try and attract investors. But that's not going to come straight away. You can't just attract investors once you haven't done anything. So we said, well, after we've done 3, then we should be in a position to show that we've got a product that meets our market need, and then show it's a repeatable product. Therefore, we've taken the risk already, and any investor can see that we've got a standard repeatable model, and there is a market demand for that standard repeatable model. Therefore, the risk of investing with us is reduced. And so we remortgaged the house, remortgaged our family home, took equity out of that, and from that, and plus savings, we've been saving hard, and then we bought 2 HMOs, or rather two properties that were very run down, did them up, and from those two, we're able to refinance them and pull 50% of the original capital out again. So it's almost buy two and get one free.
Yeah.
So we're able to do three. And from that point, we had enough of a track record of doing this successfully that we're able to attract investors.
And I think that's such a powerful thing about property investment, is that you can buy properties that you can then add value to, like you did. And you don't just have one bite of the apple. You can then refinance and pull some out and go again potentially. But honestly, what a great thing to do for you and your family. You know, pulling money out of your own home to get this started, and it sounds like it's been a great success so far. So really,
it was. I mean, it was nerve-wracking because we'd been overpaying our mortgage for decades. You know, we really had. All right, let's get the mortgage down. Let's get the mortgage down, because that's what we were told. And when I grew up, debt is bad. Debt is really bad. And then all of a sudden, I'm lying there reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, going, debt is good if it's asset-backed debt. And so, you know, Kerry and I had a long series of conversations. Hang on a minute, we've been doing this for so long. Are we really going to go and put a couple of £100,000 on our mortgage? And eventually we did. And that enables us to start. And from there, you know, we just carried on. We've got a very cookie cutter approach and a very cookie cutter model. We actually only buy one shape of house where we are, because one shape works really, really well. Of the four shapes that happen to be very close to the university, we just buy that one shape and we do it again and again and again and again. So we're able to show investors, and most of our investors are successful business people. So they kind of get and really like the approach of what's your market, what's the product that meets that market, and do you have a product that's repeatable? And so, you know, as we're able to show that shows a lot less risk for them, because they can see that their product is actually winning in the marketplace.
Oh, that sounds great. And it sounds, yeah, like you say, having a very, very clear, you know, product that you're going to be, you know, producing again and again must be very reassuring for people when they're, you know, looking to part with some of their money, you know, to invest and trust with you guys. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Okay, cool. Well, thinking back then to when you were doing this, when you were in your day job still, I remember in the email you sent to me, you have some kind of tips about things you did when you were balancing the day job. So, I mean, would you like to share some of them?
Yeah, absolutely. I popped them on Instagram a while ago. If you search under the hashtag 1,000 days to freedom, you'll see all of them come up. There's not many posts under 1,000 days to freedom, so you'll see them and send it on our Instagram account. But there are 8, and I'll just rattle through them. The first is setting the vision. So you've got to get absolute clarity on what you're trying to achieve, and the vision for that. And ours was very simply, we wanted to build a life we don't need a holiday from. And we broke that down into balance, travel, intergenerational wealth, and charity. So once you've got your vision, then you define your strategy that aligns with it. So we discarded rent to rent because we wanted to have intergenerational wealth, and we wanted to buy assets. So, you know, you can kind of chunk down. There's a lot of property strategies, but we wanted to really narrow it down to the ones that met our vision. And then we set 3-month goals to try and get to that strategy and vision, because there's so many different property strategies and so many things. I quite like a shiny penny. I quite like to be distracted by different things, and
we all do.
You know, we've only yes, absolutely. And so, you know, I'm there going, well, I haven't got that much time. I've got a day job. I've talked about, you know, 25-minute chunks to try and maximize the amount of time, but I only wanted to be focused on one area, focused on one strategy, so I could spend all my time and energy on that strategy, rather than going, oh, I'm going to do rent to rent, I'm going to do some service accommodation, I'm going to do some HMOs, I'm going to do flips. I just wanted to spend all of that precious time on one strategy so we could accelerate as fast as we possibly can. Then researching the market. You know, I've talked about the Knight Frank survey, but also we spent a long time with spreadsheet after spreadsheet just on Rightmove, on Zoopla, and going, well, what's the sale price? What's the rent? You know, every times a student probably came on the market, we just put it in the spreadsheet and to say, and so we got the photos, got the quality, and we did a big spreadsheet of what's the quality. Are they offering bills? Are they offering en suites? They're good, bad, or shocking quality. And from that, we're able to see your target market, and then you spend all your time looking at that niche in the market. Cut down on spending. So we really did cut down on the spending. We did the cash flow forecast. That really helped focus the mind of what we could do. Then we did training. Our mantra was train a day a week. We'll train a day a week. We'll do podcast in the car. Every car journey will have a podcast or an audio book, so that as we don't have much time, how do we learn whilst we're doing something else? And so driving is just a great way of doing two things at once. And then at some point, you've just got to take action. You just got to bite the bullet and get on with it. And we did buy property, and it's in the worst location. And when I first went to it, I picked up the keys and I was super excited about this property. And I thought I'd done all my market research, and I thought I was awesome. I've got it, I've done it, brilliant. And then I drove around to the property and I couldn't get there because there's 5 police vans and cars doing a drugs raid on a house 2 doors down, and there's a guy in the middle of the street in the middle of the street with police kneeling on top of him, and I physically couldn't get to the house. And I hadn't quite done enough walking around the area to realize I bought just one street too far over.
It's not a good sign.
It's not a good sign. But I still learned a lot from that. And I went and I did loads of things terribly wrong. I stripped wallpaper in that property, and whilst I was there at the weekend stripping wallpaper and saving myself £180, property came on the market £15,000 less than it should be. Some savvy investor who wasn't stripping in wallpaper bought it on the Saturday. And
isn't that a great lesson as well? Isn't that a great lesson for all of us? Who try and save a few quid here and there. That is a fantastic thing to remember, I think. Yeah,
and it was I knew it. I'd written down what's my take-home pay and how many hours do I work, so I knew how much I was earning per hour after tax, after national insurance, all of that. And mentally, I knew it was a really bad idea to strip wallpaper, but I wanted to save a few quid. And so it sometimes takes those lessons that you only learn through taking action to really have that punch in face and realise that you've been an absolute idiot stripping wallpaper.
We've all been there.
Yes.
I think it's one of those things, we've all been there and done it. But I think having that in your head, you know that somebody who wasn't stripping wallpaper snapped up a deal that it could have been yours. I think that's and it was on the Saturday, and I was looking every day. I just missed it because I had the steamer and the scraper, and wasn't the funnest job. And it's not a fun job either, is it? Let's be honest. No, lovely 4 layers with paint in between. It's not fun. No. That's great. Well, thank you for going through them. They're really helpful, and it sounds very logical, the whole thing. And you talked about having training by listening to podcasts and books in your car and things like that. But did you have any other training when you were getting started to getting your head around property in the first place and things like that? I did do the multiple streams of property income. Progression. And the best thing about that was on Andrew and Mary from Elite Dwellings. So we sat next to each other. But it was good to take time out of the day job to go and do the training. But I'm not sure I learned a huge amount more in that than I did in the podcast. There's so much free information out there from podcasts and books that was kind of it. I'm a member of the mastermind, Andy Graham and Jade's mastermind group at the moment, which is massively valuable. So that's really where I turn to for help and guidance and support at the moment. And I have a quarterly business review with Andy and Jade as well.
That's where I go for guidance help now. But before that, um, no podcasts. There's just so much information from so many different sources. I mean, just the best podcast for raising money I found is called How to Raise Money Podcast. And it's absolutely great.
Yeah.
Episode number 7, How to Build a Pack of it for an Investor. Yeah, it's just things like that. You're like, okay, I'll go and write that down. And so there is so much free information out there. It's just a matter of absorbing it and putting it into action.
And I think what you've done as well is you've distilled it into quite logical steps as well, because you can take this information in, and there's that what's it called, an analysis paralysis or something.
Yes.
Yeah, analysis paralysis, where you just keep on reading and listening and stuff like that, but actually you never then take that step. But it sounds like you've taken all the information in, you've distilled it into these steps, and then you've actually taken action, which is fantastic.
It does seem to be, I don't know if it's my corporate training or my background, but it seemed to flow really logically from one step to the another. So set the vision. Okay, what do we want to achieve? Okay, what strategy is going to meet that vision? Okay, it's this one. It's student HMOs. Okay, so what's the student HMO market like? Well, what do they want? What do students want? Okay, well, they want this. They want high quality product. They want a good cost. But that doesn't necessarily mean a cheap cost. They want a value for money, and they want good location. And so I started looking at the market around where we were, and saw what the market was like, and it's full of shockingly horrible student properties. It's all horrible. It hasn't changed since I had my student property with slugs in and the works. Like, well, hang on a minute. You've got a 75,000 person survey here showing you what the students want, and we've got a market over here that isn't delivering all of that. So there is a niche in the market. Okay, so if we believe that, then the next logical step is, okay, what's the product to meet that market? Okay, let's go and buy a house that meets those 3 needs and design a product. So it did seem quite logical to me to go from the very high level vision to a strategy to a market research to defining a product that meets the market gaps, and then just get on with it.
No, that's great. It's really good. Cool. Okay. So you've already mentioned Rich Dad as being one of the books, or if not the book, that kind of changed your kind of mindset. But do you have any other books? Obviously you've been listening to a lot of books and podcasts, but have you got any that you kind of go back to, or you would say give to a friend if they're starting to get into business or property?
Yeah, I mean, Poor Dad was the pivotal book for us. Yeah. And there was another book by Rob Dix. It was about property investment that I read at the same time. That was useful. But there's one that I really liked called The Pursuit of Wow by Tom Peters. It's like a properly old book. It's like a 1990s book. And that was one that's just basically says, look, if you're going to design a product, make sure your customer goes wow when they see the product. But actually, I kind of, because of my time limitations, I did a lot of podcasts, and the best podcast I listened to was something called Startup School by Seth Godin. And it's an old podcast. It's a 2012 podcast, and it's just a bunch of startups or people learning about how to start a business. And that's a real business focused podcast. And anyone who's starting a business, and I'd really recommend to everyone, they treat this like a business. It's not, you're not a property investor, you're starting a property investment business. And that was a fantastic resource for me. And the Tropical MBA podcast as well, because we wanted to set up a location independent business. So that was pretty cool. And it's a fun one. It's 2 American guys and about Thailand and Spain, and but also a lot of business as well.
And it's very aspirational in being able to go and work from anywhere, isn't it? So that's great. That's fantastic. I'll make sure they're in the show notes as well. I've not heard of the Startup School, but that sounds really good. I know the name Seth Godin. What's he done?
He's a marketeer largely. He's written books like Purple Cow. And he's got another podcast called Akimbo, but he's really does a lot of business and marketing. American author, But yeah, that's the podcast I've gone back and listened to end 3 or 4 times now, the Startup School.
That's great. Cool. Yeah, lovely. So what especially, I suppose, well, there might be two actually. So when you were working the day job and doing property investment on the side, and now, so they might be different, but what software or tools did you use then and use now? The main ones, the kind of ones that really help.
I mean, the one that we really use more than anything else is Office 365, or the same as the Google Suite. We have spreadsheets. We don't particularly use CRM systems. We use Xero and Dext for our accounting, but really, the only other tool that I love is floorplanner.com for drawing out floor plans. And we use that on every property. As soon as we get in and we've had the offer accepted, we go in and take a survey and measure every single room and every single dimension. And then we spend a lot of time working out the floor plans and working out the layouts. So, we know the dimensions of the beds and the wardrobes and the desks. And so we can move all of that around to our heart's content. And our aim is to make sure that we've got an absolute nailed down floor plan and spec. We know exactly what's going to happen prior to completion, so that on day one of completion, our builder's in there and he knows exactly what to do, and we've got the signed off. We've agreed the costs, and he's got the plans. And so, floorplanner.com is one we use a lot at the moment.
That's great. I've not heard of that one either. So that's fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah.
Cool, lovely. So this question is all about looking back to when you're younger. So if you could speak to your 18-year-old self, what would you say to them?
Well, I'd say to them what I'm saying to my daughter now, which is that when you get to university, buy a house, get your housemates to pay your rent, get 4 housemates, one of them will pay the mortgage, and the rest of them can pay you, and you can live there free. That's what I'd say. Scrimp, save, beg, borrow, do whatever, and try and buy that first property, because when I think back to the properties we lived in, they were absolute dives, and they were cheap back then. And I'm sure in 20, 30 years time, we'll look back and go, God, property prices were cheap in 2021, weren't they? It's just that's the way of it. So I would say buy property and hold.
I think that's a really great thing. I mean, imagine the opportunities that people are given if they're told when they're going to university, get that house so you can get your room, housemates to pay their bills. I think there's a few people who have done that and then have gone on to do really fantastic things. Actually, I suppose it's a nice introduction to property as well, because you need to go and live somewhere for a while, and it's kind of exposing you to the idea of renting to different people, and kind of getting your dipping your toe a little bit.
I think it's I wish I'd done that and bought a property in Coventry for 30 grand.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's brilliant. Well, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. You got some really, really interesting tips, and the way you've methodically worked from coming up with this idea in 2017 to where you are now is really, really fantastic.
Thanks,
but where can people find out more about you and connect with you?
We do have a website. Just search for clayproperties.co.uk, but probably the best place is on Instagram. So I'm Mike Clay, but the Instagram account is Clay Properties. So most of our posts there are kind of standard build updates, etc. But if you look through the back catalogue, you'll see all of the 1,000 Days to Freedom tips. That's the best place to either follow us or drop us a message. Best way to get in contact with us.
That's great. Thank you. Well, thanks again. And I'll see you again soon.
Thanks a lot, Stuart. It's been a pleasure.
So I hope you can agree what an amazing person. His ability to plan all the way from coming up with the idea of investing in property to 3 years later where he's left his job and he's successfully investing in student accommodation. I mean, honestly, I was blown away when he started telling me his story, and I hope you were too. But for now, that's it from me. If you liked the episode, please like. If you enjoyed it and you think other people will benefit from it, please share it. Also, one thing I'm going to start doing if I get enough questions is answering questions on the podcast. Drop me a DM or email me and I will answer them on the next episode. But for now, that's it from me. Best of luck, and I'll see you again next time. Thank you so much for listening to my podcast, and I really hope you enjoyed it. If you have, please leave me a 5-star review to help other people find it, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button.